And there are all these different things in all of our realities that we can't experience.
In our video on the rhetorical stance, we talked about how there are different ways in which a rhetorical situation might go wrong. In this video, we're going to look at one. This is a pretty big rhetorical fail on the part of Mark Zuckerberg. So what we're going to do is look at all of the ways in which Mark Zuckerberg's launch of his virtual reality system for Facebook really went very poorly. But by looking at an example of what's going wrong, it helps us to see the elements of rhetorical context. What do you need to pay attention to in a rhetorical situation in order to make sure that you not only don't fail in the way that Mark Zuckerberg did? I don't think that you can. It's really bad. But also that you know how to make certain decisions about your speech given the rhetorical context. You are looking for a variety of elements and how you might respond to all of those various elements. So we're going to break down this video. I'm going to have a link to the full video in the description, so you can go down there if you want to watch it uninterrupted. And I recommend that you do that. But I'm just going to kind of use some clips from the video to talk about some particularly bad points that some particularly bad, let's call them generously, gaffes.
Yes, I think the first place that we want to go today is Puerto Rico to check out this interesting 360 video that NPR took of what's going on down there. So let's go quickly teleport there. All right. So now we are in a 360 video in Puerto Rico, and hold on a second, and you can kind of get a sense of we're on a bridge here. It's flooded. You can get a sense of some of the damage here that the hurricanes have done. And I mean, this is one of the things that's really magical about virtual reality is you can get the feeling that you're really in a place.
The first element that we need to think about in a rhetorical context is salience. Now, this is maybe not a word you're familiar with, but you can think about it as something that jumps out at you in a situation. Really, what's the most important thing? What's in salience is something that might be thought of as an answer to a question of what the this or the that refers to when someone's talking. So if I come up to a group of my friends and I say, hey, this is crazy, or if I say, hey, this is really fun, the this that I don't have to name, that everyone would understand, that's the thing that is in salience. It's not exactly the same thing as attention, but it's something like a norm of attention. So you might be looking at your phone and then say, sorry, I was distracted. That's because there are expectations in every social situation about what you should be attending to. That is the thing that is in salience. If you're in a class, what's in salience, it ought to be the material and the atmosphere of learning. Sometimes that's not the case, but that's ought to be what it is. And so even if no one is paying attention in a class, what is in salience might still be something that is not what people are actually paying attention to. Obviously, one of the goals of a good speech is to make the audience's actual empirical attention line up with what the speech wants to put in salience, what the speech is about, so to speak. So one of the problems here in Zuckerberg's speech is that what's in salience is not what he wants to talk about. He wants to talk about the virtual reality model that Facebook is proposing, and what becomes in salience very quickly, because it is an event of greater magnitude and because of the discordant relationship between these cartoon avatars and the devastation that they're speaking in front of. That means that what he's speaking about starts to sound like something that is out of place. That feeling that something is out of place is because our attention is being drawn into what is most salient to most audiences. Here, the background. Whereas the speech, even when it points to the background, doesn't seem to be doing it in the way in which we're drawn into it. It seems to be out of harmony with that. And that's related to another part of rhetorical context, which is affect or mood.
But there's so much more that's needed to help out in Puerto Rico right now. Facebook has donated more than $1.5 million to the relief effort already, in addition to the other efforts that I mentioned a second ago. And there's a lot more that needs to happen. So this is an area that we're continuing to focus on. This is an area that Facebook is very focused on trying to help out in the recovery effort. When the hurricanes first hit, we did a bunch of work around launching Safety Check to make it so that people in the community could tell all their friends and loved ones that they were safe. We activated community help, so that way people could say they needed food or shelter, and people in the community could provide that if they had that. We ran a bunch of fundraisers to help raise money for the relief efforts. But on top of that, we also did a bunch of work ourselves in terms of sending Facebook employees down to Puerto Rico to help with connectivity, right? Because when you're in the middle of a disaster like this, it's really important that people have access to the internet. It's important both so that people can connect with their friends and their family outside of the disaster zone to tell them that they're okay or tell them what's going on. But it's also important so that way when relief workers go down there, they could coordinate with each other and know where people need help.
Next, we're going to think about purpose as part of the rhetorical context. It's easy to think about purpose as the point that I want to make, but that's actually a mistake. The purpose of a rhetorical in a rhetorical context, we should begin by thinking about as the reason that people have come together, the reason that we as a group, that the audience and the speaker have come together to share some idea, some information. What's the purpose for gathering? Even when we're in a situation of distance, it's the same ideas apply. Why is someone coming to my YouTube channel? Are they looking for information? Are they looking to be entertained? It's really the purpose of the audience that defines the purpose of a rhetorical context. What we have in this video is a really interesting kind of failure because there are two things at cross purpose here. Mark and Rachel have created this video clearly to show off their bells and whistles of their virtual reality program for Facebook. At the same time, Mark also makes another announcement. He makes an announcement about the help that Facebook is giving to Puerto Rico. So these things are at cross purpose because the mood and the significance of one of them outdoes the other. And so it makes it seem, even though you may think this just seems like a nice thing that Facebook's doing, at the point that it seems like an afterthought or secondary to the primary purpose, we have a hierarchy of values that's set up by the speaker. That the main purpose for speaking is to introduce a virtual reality component to Facebook. The secondary purpose is a PR move, or more generously, some philanthropy from Mark Zuckerberg to the people of Puerto Rico on behalf of Facebook. So because those two things are at cross purpose, even something that could genuinely be felt like a good deed can now be thought of as a negative by the audience because it seems like he's placing his own purposes above those of the people of Puerto Rico. And that's something that we really want to avoid. Purpose is a complex part of a rhetorical context. It's not something that can be easily captured in all of its dimensions by one example. But the main thing to take away here is that your purpose has to be folded in to the purpose of the audience for listening to you in the first place. What's their purpose? That's what we have to begin with.
Right. I mean, I probably should have mentioned this before, but Rachel and I actually aren't even, I think, in the same building in the physical world
Exactly.
here.
We're in
But I
totally
mean,
different
we're
places.
here. I mean, it feels like we're in the same place and we're making eye
Yeah,
contact.
but
We're talking to each
we
other.
could high five
Yeah,
if
there
we
you go. High
wanted
five.
to. And
One of the really crucial aspects of every rhetorical context is something that we can call mood or affect. Affect might be the better term because mood seems to imply something that's really personal. I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a good mood. But mood here is a collective idea. It's the mood in the room, so to speak. There's a phrase in Japanese about reading the air in a situation. And that's kind of what understanding mood is about. And it relates to our earlier point about salience, because we can think about mood as what the expected emotional response is to whatever in salience. So if what we think is the major thing that's going on is going to provoke a mood that's happy, then that is the mood of the rhetorical situation or the rhetorical context that you're in. At the same time, that doesn't mean that you are kind of totally captured by the mood, that you can't speak in any different way than what the mood would prescribe. It is possible, for instance, even at a funeral, a time of deep grief, for someone to give a eulogy and bring people to laughter. These kinds of things are quite common. So part of that works on changing what is in salience by kind of shifting the focus of the audience from what would be kind of very obvious, the obvious thing that's in salience, and sometimes making it more precise. So at a funeral, the death of a person is what's in salience, the death of someone that is beloved. But we make it more crisp by bringing into focus a certain moment from their life, a certain story. So that allows us to kind of still feel grief and at the same time allow us to feel joy in our memory or humor about this person and feel both of those things together. Sometimes, however, you will need to change the mood completely by either totally shifting the salience of what we're talking about, saying, well, I know that we're gathered here to discuss X, but we really need to focus on Y. So we talked a little bit about that when we discussed salience. However, one of the things that you don't want to do is pretend that the mood doesn't exist or miss the mood in the room. And that's what we see happening in this video. So when Mark and Rachel high five about their new virtual reality in front of a scene of devastation in Puerto Rico, they're really getting the mood wrong. Obviously, again, Hurricane Maria is what's in salience. The devastation of people's lives, their homes, a disaster, that is what's in salience. The virtual reality program is now far less important to us than what we're actually witnessing in the literal background. And what we're seeing is Mark and Rachel missing the mood that is appropriate for that by engaging in a high five and a couple other gestures that they make along the way. But that's the most egregious one in their failure about mood.
yeah, great.
All
Well,
right.
you can see that we can really feel like we're here. But
Yeah, no, I mean,
do
this
you
street
think
is just completely flooded. I
Yeah.
mean, can you guys see this behind me? I mean, this is what it looks like down
It's crazy
here.
to feel like you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So do you wanna go
Should we-
teleport somewhere else?
Yeah, maybe back to California.
All right, let's do it.
Style or register. We're thinking about an aspect of a rhetorical situation that depends a lot upon the speaker, but it also depends upon the audience's appreciation for and ability to hear the difference of the way that the speaker is presenting their speech from the other possibilities of how it might have been. Style always implies some other. If my style is very lofty, that's because you're hearing in it a choice to go high rather than to go casual. That way of hearing the differences in style is going to vary depending on the kind of audience that you're talking to or speaking with. And the fitness of a style to a speech primarily depends upon one's audience, but it also depends upon all of those other elements of the rhetorical situation. What are we talking about? What's in salience? Obviously, a really casual style was not going to work when we're introducing a head of state. In most circumstances, maybe if it's Duterte or someone like that, a casual style might be preferred. But in most situations, the style and the register are going to be fitted to what's salient there, and also to the mood and the affect of the situation. If we have a really jokey style in a situation that's really tense, that might help to reduce the tension if it's played well, but it also might seem like that person isn't in tune with everyone else, and it might lead to anger or resentment about the speaker. So in this case, when we think about style, in addition to the fact that I wouldn't say that this is a great example of a highly polished speech. The arrangement is not so great. The delivery is pretty bad. There's a lot of things that are wrong with it, and that's why it's an example for this video. But in terms of style, I think we can say that both Mark and Rachel are really casual in their delivery, and that is really out of tune with what they're speaking about and the salience and the mood of the context. And for that reason, they really should have chosen a different style. Sometimes you might have to change your style or your register through your speech. You might move between topics in a complex speech, and that means that you might have to shift your style. And that's okay. What you don't want to do is kind of defer to the most obvious or the most conversational style in every situation. Because even if a conversational style might be natural, it nevertheless might come as being out of tune with what you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll flip the camera.
Oh yeah.
They can see the audience.
There
That's the audience from last year.
Yeah. So
there you go.
Yeah, this is basically what I saw from the stage last year when we were doing OC3, Oculus Connect. Actually, last year at OC3 was the first time that we demoed Facebook Spaces. And I basically got on stage and live and in front of everyone did this live demo in VR. That was fairly scary. But
last, but certainly not least, we come to audience as a crucial element of every rhetorical context. Now, of course, audience in a physical situation usually implies the people that are there empirically, physically listening to the speech that you're giving. At the same time, even in such a situation as that, the audience isn't just the individuals that are assembled. When people gather together to listen to something, they become something almost beyond an individual. We begin to hear and listen to a speech as a collective. We hear it through the kinds of assumptions and expectations that the purpose of the gathering would include, our relationships to the speaker, the matter that we're talking about. All of those things are kind of filtered through our own way of listening and judging a speech as a collective. That's even more true when we are in a mediated situation. We're seeing a video or a speech as a possible speech that somebody else might hear. So when we are reacting to it and we're having a response to it, we're not only thinking about how we feel about the video, we're thinking about how the speaker thought about how we and others might hear this, the kinds of inferences and expectations that they assumed we would have versus the ones that we actually do have. The greater the distance there is between those, the more distance there is between the audience and the speaker. Now, in the video with Mark and Rachel, they clearly assumed that their audience was going to be a group of people who were excited in some way about Facebook's virtual reality technology. The video had a far wider audience than that, mostly because people were upset by it and it became a viral piece of content that people were looking at for an unexpected reason. But we always want to imagine and prepare for audiences that are beyond our own purpose. And this goes back to purpose as part of the rhetorical context that we're speaking in. Our own purpose cannot become our imagination of the audience. The audience is a way of hearing and listening when we're preparing for a speech to how might something sound? How might something be taken? And so, in some way, though audience we can be thought about as an element of a rhetorical context, audience is in another way precisely all aspects of the rhetorical context held together in the ears of an individual. So that's just a way of beginning to think about rhetorical context, and hopefully also make you feel a little bit more confident that you can speak better, and I know that you can, than billionaire, Facebook entrepreneur, Mark Zuckerberg.
I mean, one of the big themes that we talk about for VR all the time is that, these days it's it's a lot easier to be able to move bits around than atoms.